Good morning and welcome to Here's the Thing for October 8th, 2014. DPR the man, that's who I am. And what we need to talk about today is a subject that's near and dear to my heart and became nearer and dearer over the past several days. Yeah, I get on Facebook at least once a week, maybe twice. It's no big deal to me. But I get on there and I find inspirations for show subjects. And that doesn't mean that I get all my news from Facebook. It just kind of triggers something, if you will, that makes me want to spend an hour or two of my time putting it all together, doing the homework. If you'll recall, last year we worked on the Constitution of the United States of America. Every week I read a section until I read most all of it. I say most all of it because I never specifically read all of the amendments. I read the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is where we're at today. Hold on one second.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming?
Madison Rising. That, if you'll recall, was my official bumper music for the section of my program on the Constitution of the United States of America. And what is the Constitution of the United States of America? Why? Well, long story short, the original document, the what did they call them? The Federalist, not the Federalist Papers, but the original method of governing, if you will. And again, the name slips my mind. You'll have to excuse me for a moment. I'll probably think of it when I don't need it anymore. But bottom line was there were 13 colonies, hence there were 13 states. All 13 states wanted to have equal say in the government, and that simply wouldn't work. In order to solve that, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. That's why we have a Constitution. Very simple. Wonderful thing about the Constitution, it's an extremely simple document. You don't need to be a lawyer to read the Constitution. You don't need to be a lawyer to understand the language in the Constitution, provided that you've taken your education at least remotely seriously. You should be able to read the words. And you should be able to not read between the lines. Okay, so what we have here is Amendment 1. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Okay, why did they have a Bill of Rights? Well, basically, when they wrote the Constitution, they were at first more concerned with establishing some sort of organized federal government that had enough rights to function and still allow the states to have enough rights to sign the document. That's basically what it was. In other words, you didn't want 13 different currencies out there, so the government, the federal government, is the only government allowed to print currency, just as an example. Okay? You wanted to have one set of rules that overrode all the others, just in case there were conflicts between states. It could be resolved perhaps by referring to that one master document. Hence, none of the state constitutions can have clauses in them that violate the federal constitution. It was all set up so that the states felt that their voices were heard and the people of those states were heard, but yet the federal government is kind of like, don't do anything without running it by the federal government because they may have to make the final decision. But all things will be considered. That was the principle involved there. That's what it was all about. There were a lot of parts of the Constitution that didn't address problems of the time. But the framers of the Constitution were smart enough to realize that, and they left a very clear-cut method of changing the Constitution intact so that we could, if we needed to, or we felt we needed to, or conditions or advancements in civilization would cause us to have to make differences in the Constitution. Hence, civil rights, the abolishment of slavery and so forth. Changes in the election laws. And it was all done by 2/3 of the Senate approving it, or 2/3 of the House of Representatives, and 2/3 of each of all of the states in turn would have to approve it. The people would vote in the states, and if the state approved it, fine. If not, then not. But again, states' rights, everything was divided out. Power was divided between all the entities involved, including the people, we the people, to decide what to change in the Constitution. And changes were made. Many for the good. Most for the good. But the first set, the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, because that's when they started to address the specific needs of the people. Not the needs of the government. The needs of the people. And that First Amendment was established simply because in Europe at the time, in fact in many countries, most countries at the time, and leading up to that time, there were state religions. If your emperor or your king happened to be a certain religion, then everyone had to be that religion. Otherwise, you were denied rights. You were not a full citizen. You could be persecuted, prosecuted, in some cases even killed or tortured, depending upon what era we're talking about. But the people who came over here with the intent of being able to establish their religion without interference from a central government. And the forefathers were part of that crowd. They were descendants of that crowd in some cases, or part of it. Therefore, they wanted to make sure that the Constitution of the United States of America was a purely secular document, a document which addressed secular matters, matters of this earth, matters of men and women, people. God is not mentioned in the Constitution. Someone made that observation on Facebook. And they were right. When they said the separation of church and state wasn't addressed in the Constitution, they were wrong. It is. I just read it. Black and white. Read it. Where were you in history class, people? Where were you? Are they not teaching that anymore? It's possible they're not. Well, they were when I was in school. So my point is, and the posting that I'm referring to, and again, I'm not using names because I don't get permission to use these names, and if I don't have permission, I won't use the name. However, the person who posted it, it said, it had a picture of the Constitution, a picture of the Bible, side by side, and it said, this is the law of the land, not this. 100% correct. 100% correct. Okay? The laws of the United States of America are based upon the United States Constitution. At least they have been up until now. Now they're based upon the pen of Barack Hussein Obama. But we're not here to talk about that. Talked about that enough. If any of you people are, shall we say, muddled enough not to realize what's happening in terms of the imperial presidency, then shame on you. However, the Constitution of the United States of America, the law of the land, the law that provides for rights for the citizens of the United States of America, the legal citizens of the United States of America, the documented citizens of the United States of America. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what religion you are. It doesn't matter what gender you are. If you are a legal, documented citizen of the United States of America, then you are entitled to the rights of the Constitution of the United States of America. If you live in another country, you're subject to those laws of the land. That's man governing man. Now, in our currency, we have "In God We Trust." In the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag, we have "One nation under God" in many cases. Now, what is God? Well, the whole post got started up with comments and so forth, and it turned into an argument over the existence of God. I'm going to put that to rest right now. Now listen, because I guarantee you I did my homework on this. In fact, I even took courses on it. I even learned how to frame it. And my own parents, my own father, and many people I've known have helped me put this into perspective over the last, 40, 50 years. So you're not going to change my mind about it, but you're going to listen to me, and I'm going to change yours, because you need to wake up. Many of you. The old saying was, you don't argue two things, religion and politics. Well, we can argue politics because that's a man-made thing. But religion comes from another part of us. Religion comes from something that doesn't apply to governments. So let's separate it out for just a moment and take a look at it. Thomas Aquinas is one example of a famous philosopher. Used his skill in philosophy and deductive logic, which is the basis of philosophy. Deductive logic, yes, the basis of philosophy. He logically proved that God exists. Now, I didn't go back and figure out the whole proof. Okay, we learned that at one time. I was tested on it, and I aced it. That was a long time ago. Suffice it to say, he did that. And while he was doing that, other philosophers, up until the time of Nietzsche, had equally valid logical proofs that God doesn't exist. And they were absolutely right, as was Thomas Aquinas. In the framework of man-made deductive logic, they were both right and they were both wrong. How can that be, you may ask? That isn't logical. Even Spock had to laugh once in a while, okay? That isn't logical. Of course it isn't. Of course it isn't. Deductive logic is based on three premises. 1, identity. A must exist. 2, you must have either A or B. 3, you can't have both A and B. Okay, so how does one explain God or the lack thereof using deductive logic? If you can't see it, hear it, feel it, touch it, or smell it, you have a choice. You can either believe it's there or not. So your A, the premise you begin with, has to be one or the other. It can't be both. Logically proving that logic doesn't work in all situations. You can assume there's a God and proceed to prove it. You can assume there isn't and proceed to prove that. And you'll be right both times. And you'll be wrong both times. Because you can't sense it. We as humans, Homo sapiens, animals of the animal kingdom, the highest on the food chain, are not capable of proving or disproving that which we do not sense or perceive. We can conceive, but we can't perceive. Hence the term faith. There is no way that any group of people on either side of the question are going to convince the other group that they're wrong or right. They simply decide which way they want to go, and they go that way. So stop wasting your time telling each other that there is or is not a God. It doesn't matter in the case of the Constitution of the United States of America. It matters in terms of one's personal beliefs and personal behavior and personal rules of how they live their life. Because we can go on and on and on about the sins of man. And the people who say there is no God say the sins exist because there is no God. If there was a God, there wouldn't be any sin. And the people who believe there's a God say there's sin because man has free will and he can decide which way he wants to go. And they will all answer for it one day. Now, I've made it clear in the past where I stand on those issues, and I'm not going to go into it right now because it doesn't serve my purpose at this point in time. However, I have to point out that this program has always been about people trying to obtain personal excellence and attain some sort of leadership of themselves and the people around them, thereby improving the lot of themselves and the people around them. So with that in mind, okay, when you run into people who get on Facebook or any other social media and start calling you names because of what you believe, you have to ask yourself, are they attaining personal excellence? Are they attaining personal excellence by degrading you because they don't agree with you? Are they attaining personal excellence by having no logical reputation for anything you say. They simply have an opinion, and that opinion is the be-all and end-all that they happen to have at the time. Is that personal excellence? I say no. I say that if they want to attain personal excellence, they have to agree to disagree when it comes to that subject and go on about their lives. So let's quickly get back to the separation of church and state, because time is moving on. I can see that by the little meter on my video board here. Okay. Separation of church and state simply means that the government is not going to interfere in one's religion. That's all. I don't have to spend a whole lot of time explaining that. It has nothing to do with whether or not we support prayer in the schools. It has nothing to do with treating one religion differently from another because some of them happen to be terrorists. It has nothing to do with putting up holiday displays for Christmas, for instance, and being afraid of offending the Jews. Most of the Jews are probably laughing, at least the ones I've talked to. They could care. They're going to remain Jews, and we're going to remain Christians, regardless of what displays we put up and when we put them up. It doesn't matter. We're not trying to make them into Christians, and they're not trying to make us into Jews. The vast majority, the average people. Whenever I talk about Christian principles, that's me talking. You can agree with me or you don't have to. I don't care. It's your right to make that decision. Under the Constitution of the United States of America, the government has nothing to say about it. Yet there are people out there who would purport that the government should be passing laws and regulations regarding those issues. Okay? Hence, we have skinheads, white supremacists, Black Panthers, jihadists, extremists. Just as a sidebar on the political scene, what happens there is your left-wing Democrats paint the entire right-wing Republican or conservative section of the country as being part of that group. That's not true. The vast majority of people in this country simply want to be able to live their lives the way they always have in terms of their freedoms, make their choices, and live with the consequences without the federal government's interference. In the case of religion, that's the way it is. And that's all the way it is. And that's always been the way it is. And that's always been the way it should be. And hopefully will be. The separation of church and state simply means that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Period. How simple do you want it? How many fewer words could they use? We move on because now it's time for the Institute for the Utterly Stupid. And who's our nominee today? For the second time that I'm aware of, at least. That would be Secretary of State John Kerry. This comes from a September 3rd article by Matthew Burke, the Tea Party News Network. Okay, and it goes right along with what we've been talking about, or what I've been talking about now for the last 20 minutes. Could this be the most imbecilic statement from any politician in modern times? Yeah, it could be. Mr. Kerry was addressing a group honoring Sharik Zafar, the newly appointed special representative to Muslim communities. Mr. Burke wants us to notice that the leftists do not think that this position violates their normally maniacal adherence to separation of church and state for some inexplicable reason. So now our government has a special representative to Muslim communities. Kerry said, quote, "Our faiths are inextricably linked," and he couldn't even say inextricably, "on any number of things that we must confront and deal with in policy concepts today," Kerry said. "Our faiths are inextricably linked on the environment. For many of us, respect for God's creation also translates into a duty to protect and sustain his first creation, Earth, the planet. Before God created man, he created heavens and earth." Of course, if a Republican or a pro-Constitution, pro-freedom, or Tea Party member used biblical references to push their political agenda, they're verbally tarred and feathered, or drug into court by Eric Holder, or drug into court by God-hating atheist groups. Well, you can't be drug into court by Heinrich Holder anymore. He quit. Okay, what does that say? What does that say? That says that our own federal government is now pushing the argument that everyone has over the existence of God and the establishment of religion and what religion you should belong to or could belong to, or if you belong to a religion, that somehow you're less of a citizen or less of a patriot than one who doesn't belong to a religion, either a certain religion or any religion. What better way to keep the American voting public divided than to push them on the issue of religion, that which will never be resolved, ever, until or unless one of the apocalyptic views of one of the religions comes to pass. It amazes me how people, especially people who were brought up at the time that I was brought up, that they don't have a perspective on this. They don't see what's happening here. And if they do, they're not doing anything about it. I guess you could call it runaway conflictism. I've said this a million times before. The politicians, the government, the regime has nothing to lose by keeping us arguing constantly over points we can't resolve, such as the differences in the colors of our skin, or our religions, or our gender. Those things are done. They seldom, well, in some cases, never change. We have to agree to be different. That's why the country was founded the way it was. That's why the Constitution was written the way it was. To recognize the fact, to begin with, that there were states involved which had different ideas about how things should be done, and then the people in those states, and then the people of the country. We, the people. Every different one of us. There are certain things that we all have to agree on. We have to agree on the general welfare, the common defense, a more perfect union. The preamble says it all. It's simple. It's easy. You don't have to argue those points. There's no sense in arguing those points. They aren't going to go away. For those of you out there who think that we should throw the Constitution away, more power to you. Go live somewhere where they don't have it and find out if that's what you like. But John Kerry has made it clear that this regime will stoop to the lowest of low points in order to establish their power over our beliefs, the way we live our lives, the way our country is presented to the rest of the world. And why? To what end? Well, basically, to drive us down to the point where we'll do or think whatever we're told. Peter Gabriel, you know, we do what we're told, we do what we're told. Just another brick in the wall, to use another musical phrase. We have an opportunity to wake up come November. And if we don't do it, okay, our politicians are running away from us, all of them. They're so busy perpetuating their power that they're losing track of why they're there in the first place. It's been happening for a long time. We have a chance to change that. Let's make sure we do. Let's get people like Mr. Kerry, graphic. Let's get him out of the way. Let's get Obama out of the way. Let's get the entire leftist agenda out of the way. If we have to snap back to the right in order to get to the middle again, let's do that. We move on. Newsy tidbit. Usually I used to lead with those last year, but I thought I'd throw it in at the end today. The Washington Post, October 7th, 6:22 a.m. Isamu Akasaki, Hiroshi Amano, and Shuji Nakamura have won the Nobel Prize in Physics for the invention of the blue light-emitting diode. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences announced early Tuesday. I thought I'd throw that in because I happened to catch it. And I thought to myself, what about the red one and the yellow one and the orange one and the green one and the white one? Don't those people feel a little left out? What more noble enterprise could they be involved in than inventing a blue LED? I must admit, blue LEDs are quite captivating. They're intense. They make my Christmas lights look great. And for that, they got a Nobel Prize. Why not? Okay, where are we now? Sitting in the bustling studios of the top production WELB-DBJ Radio. DPR the man, that's who I am. And we're reaching the near end of the show. And at the near end of the show, I have to remind the audio people that you can reach this program via email at hdt2010@roadrunner.com. You can reach the program via comments on heresdathing.com's Facebook page, and through YouTube or Google Plus using the search term Here's the Thing. By doing that, you are providing me with material to further my venture into explaining to you why things are the way they are. Tell me what you're thinking, and I'll tell you why you're thinking it. And the music ended. I hate that. Be that as it may, we move on to our fabulous conclusion. So, with a tear in my eye, I reach the conclusion of this week's edition of Here's the Thing for October 8th, 2014. DPR the man, that's who I am. And Estopaki Productions, along with WELB-DBJ Radio, has brought you this edition of Here's the Thing. And as I always say at the end of every show, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, from the top of my brain, have a good day, have a good week, have a good life. Come back and see me next week for another edition of Here's the Thing. Remember, you may actually be a part of it.